Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining in. This is now Gemini 2. So these were the cards from last week, right? And like always, I kind of like to reflect on them and how these came forward for me the last 10 days or so. Um, Honestly, it's been interesting. It's kind of had this whole kind of like up and down cycles where some things were really good. Like some days were really good, some days were really not good. It was kind of back and forth on that. Um Feeling overwhelmed, not so much that way. Like I didn't really feel very overwhelmed or not sure what to do or which way to go or different things like that. Didn't really feel that at the level that I was expecting it to. There was couple personal situations that took place where it was kind of had that energy behind it, but not at like a really heavy level or like at a strong level. The one thing I can say is anything that I arranged or purchased or did during the Seven of Pentacles has still not fallen into place. I am still waiting on packages that are taking so slow, it's unnatural. Just situations that came to light during that time are taking forever to fall in place and is really literally leaving me wondering if they're even going to happen. So really strange energy, and I feel like I'm still feeling a lot coming from the Seven of Pentacle week more so than this. However, it maybe just isn't manifesting quite strongly in my life the way that other cards have, right? So, like I said, I'm feeling this, but just not at a severity or like a level that I was really expecting, right? Much more toned down, it seems to be. Now, we have some cards that we obviously have to change. So I'm going to get right into that and start doing that because we have a lot to look at in the next 10 days, and it's going to be quite interesting. So let's change everything out that needs to be changed out. So let's do our changes. Let's get all these out of here that no longer are in place. So we are dealing with the Nine of Swords. I know. It doesn't get any better. Here's the Tower. So the next 10 days, yay. We've got Mars energy, which does not help any at all either. And then here is our Hermetic Tarot cards, the Nine of Swords and the Blasted Tower. I know what everybody's thinking. I know what I'm thinking. I'm like, oh crap, here we go. All right, so like I said, these all still stay the same. We're in Gemini, which is an air sign. We're still in the mutable, right? So that's all still staying the same. That won't change for a little bit longer. And then this is our cards and the energy that is going to be in place for the next 10 days or so. Yeah. All right. So before we start freaking out and thinking weird, rotten things, let's get into Susan Chang's book and see what she's saying about it. Yeah. Okay. But yeah. All right. Let's do that first. In Susan's book, she talks about how people immediately, when she's doing reads for customers and clients and whatnot, how people, the minute they see these cards, they're just like, they freak out, right? I have the tendency to do it too. When I see this card, I'm like, ugh, here we go. When I see this card, I'm like, oh, good God, really? And then, you have your other notorious card, which is the Ten of Swords, which, we'll be seeing next Decan, right? Everybody automatically goes to a very negative space with these cards, right? Um, they are very unpleasant looking pictures, right? And they kind of affect us in kind of deep that deep way, right? The death card also tends to trigger people, but if you know tarot and you've spent time with tarot, you know the death card isn't necessarily what everybody freaks should be freaking out about, right? We know these cards are the trouble cards and these tend to bring issues. However, yeah, like stuff's going to happen and stuff's going to go down, but at the end of the day, it has to, in order for something new to come in, right? So even though it is a negative situation or a scary situation, or unwanted change at the get-go, at the end of the day, the Tower card has to happen in order for that new fresh energy to come in, right? So I always try to say, okay, yeah, the Tower is nasty sometimes, but after the Tower usually comes something good, right? So let's just keep that in mind. um, at least that's what I try to do, right? Okay, so when we look at her book, she talks about how the Nine of Swords represents a lot of anxiety and grief, right? And I feel nowadays that is like the number one issue that exists on this planet is the level of stress and anxiety that wreaks havoc on the collective, right? It's There's not a single person that I know that's not stressed about something or has anxiety over something. And I feel like stress and anxiety is at an all new level where it's actually starting to become a serious issue in people, right? Everything is so unsure and everything is so up in the air that it just gives such a sense of instability that it really, really, really affects us, right? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen 10 years down the road. We have no idea what's going to happen, right? And the events that have taken place over the years have led to this uncertainty, this unknowing. And it's just goes against our natural ways, right? Like when you talk to, my grandfather, let's say, or my grandmother back in the day, they would be like, "Oh, I knew that we were good. I knew that I was going to marry him, or I knew we were going to be fine. Even though things are going bad, I knew we would be great. I knew things would work themselves out." They had this certainty about the future. They had this knowing that everything was going to be fine, that I feel doesn't really exist nowadays and is definitely starting to not exist, which is causing a lot of PTSD in people and high levels of stress, high levels of anxiety, high levels of panic, right? So when we see this card, that is definitely what it's pertaining to, is anxiety and stress and worry and nightmares. But because it's a sword, right? It's usually within ourselves. It's usually not an external element. It's usually something that is, I don't want to say that we're making up in our mind, but it's like our imagination has gotten away from us. Our thoughts have gotten the best of us, right? And at the end of the day, we're expecting the absolute worst, right? But is it really going to happen, right? So, I mean, there's a little bit of trickery to these cards. She talks about in the Eight of Swords, which is the card that we just walked away from, we saw the moment when Adam and Eve exercised their free will, choosing to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. In short order, the angel with the flaming sword arrives to send them to exile. We see this angel, minus the sword in the lover's card. But what angel is this, right? Nobody says what angel this is. It might be Raphael, who is associated with the element of air in the Golden Dawn tradition. It might be Michael, the sword-bearing angel of fire. It could be Uriel, said to guard the gates of Eden. And at the same time, all of these angels refer back to Eros, or Cupid, on the Tarot de Marseille. You got to remember, the Tarot of Marseille is older. Angels are messengers. The message could be one of warning or benediction. As always, tarot speaks to us on multiple levels at once. But when we add in the Tower card, it stands for Mars, and the message becomes harder to misinterpret. It is as though a punishment for disobedience. And then she goes on to talk about how everyone needs a coping mechanism for the Nine of Swords. A lot of people will say, oh, it's all in your head, different stuff like that. And then she goes to quote Dumbledore from Harry Potter, where he says, of course it's happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean it's not real, right? Because even though it is happening inside of our minds and our imagination gets the best of us, and we usually have this situation kind of blowing up and expecting the absolute worst, at the end of the day, a situation has taken place that has triggered that, right? So yeah, it is real, but to what extent, right? So in her book, she talks about how the Thoth version of this card is the blood-stained, sharp-edged Lord of Cruelty, and it seems to imply a kind of ruthless behavior towards other. The Smith-Waite card, by contrast, is easier to read as cruelty more towards ourselves. But I think so she says that she thinks it's important, though, to remember that the two are deeply linked. Those who are cruel to themselves are often cruel to others, and vice versa. And then she talks about how many times that she's discovered that someone that she thought was unkind was actually in pain. Pain is hard to deal with. Real pain, whether it's mental, emotional, or physical, it changes a person, and not for the good. It's pain is hard. Pain is difficult, right? And it does weigh on you, and it changes a person, and it usually doesn't change them for the better, unfortunately. So she talks about how this card, how this is a kind of a special note for writers, that this is time that you probably experience a writer's block, or the inability to accept what you've written, be self-criticizing and being insecure about your talents and your abilities, right? So she said, like, this really affects writers at this time. So if you're a writer, you might possibly be dealing with some writer's block, or just being really too hard on yourself. And in her book, she talks about how the number 10 represents completion of something, and the nines represent the moment of awareness of it about to unfold. And she talks about how so much of our lives are lived in anticipation for the next reality, that you could say that we're almost magically shaping our minds even as we go. Like all nines, the Nine of Swords holds enormous power, which makes it dangerous. Respect the Nine of Swords power and treat it like the radioactive material it is. Do not try to dismiss your fears or anxieties. If you push too hard, they'll only come back. But on the other hand, don't dwell on them either. And then she talks about how she has two good remedies for the Nine of Swords. She has solution 1, the Nine of Pentacles. If you can, be kind to yourself. Don't compare yourself to others. Care and protect for your body, and remind yourself of your positive contributions to this world. Her solution 2, which is the Six of Swords, which is a balanced partner of the 9 in the middle of the pillar of Tree of Life, right? So she's referring this back to the pillar of life. Is there a remedial action you can take to resolve the problems that are troubling you? Take it, or at least take the first steps. So I really enjoy how she turns to other cards within the tarot to seek answers for the card that we're experiencing. I think that's really, really really awesome how she does that. And it's something I've never really even thought of doing myself. But it makes sense, right? The answers for tarot are in tarot. I don't know, really quite cool. And a very interesting concept. So she talks about when she's drawn the Nine of Swords in her life. Historically, it's meant all kinds of headaches, and especially literal ones. Migraines coming on. At other times, it's had to do with performance anxiety, like possible job evaluations, things like that. So at the end of the day, she says, when you draw the Nine of Swords, hunt for the root of your pain that lies within yourself rather than outside yourself. So remember, we're talking about that sword energy, that inside. That's what's inside of us, that mental energy, right? It's not necessarily, we're not necessarily looking to the outside sources. And then she talks about how her husband paraphrased from a Buddhist text, but she doesn't know which one. And I found these words amazing. If you can do something about it, why worry? If you can't do something about it, why worry? It's a big thing to just remember how much control we actually have over situations. And usually it's very little. So to worry about something that hasn't happened or is going to happen is really honestly not going to do anything, right? Because at the end of the day, we probably pretty much have no control over it anyways. So what's the point of worrying about it because we can't do anything anyways? And I know that that's hard to do. I know stress, anxiety, like I said, it's running rampant. It's a plague that's in place around the world right now, and it's definitely an issue. So if you find your mind getting away with you, if you find that the next 10 days your anxiety and stress is a little high, remember that solution to visit those two cards and to see if there's some answers to that, right? Some ways that you can help yourself through it. Hopefully, it's not too much of a stressful time, but this card has already shown itself in my life 100%. There's an empty property next to our building, and it's been vacant, and there's nothing on it. But we know that whatever gets built there directly affects us when that day comes. It can possibly affect our life. It can possibly affect my business. It can possibly affect our well being because this property isn't just a residential property, it has the ability to be light commercial as well. It could be something obnoxious, it could be something horrible, right? But at the same time, I do have to remind myself that I live in a very quiet, sleepy town. And even if something does get built there, the chances of it actually lasting and staying open past a year is really honestly next to none. Because in the town I live in, everything closes in a year. If that, nothing ever makes it because it's just too small of a community for anything to really make it. So I mean, at the end of the day, I have to remember that. But today, this morning, there was somebody on the property doing surveying, which means they're starting to look at building on it. And so, right here, my anxiety and stress just went bloop, 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 because I'm worried about what's going to happen with it. And even though where I live at is a very small farming community, for some reason, people buy properties here thinking they're going to do something great here. And like I said, it never turns out. So, hopefully whatever's going on over there doesn't negatively impact my life here because it has the possibilities to do so. And then we're looking right at this card right here. I automatically go to the worst case scenarios, right? And think about how it can wreck my life here, how it can change my everyday, how it can become a nuisance, right? So, right here, it's literally day one and I'm already feeling it and its pressure, which then sometimes with Mars makes my my temper get the best of me too. It puts me in a bad mood because I'm sitting here worrying about all this stuff, expecting the worst case scenarios, and then it puts me into a bad mood, and then I look like this lioness on here, and I'm not happy, and I'm ready to just attack because I'm just not in a good place, right, mentally. So like I said, this is already coming into place. And how crazy is that? That property has been vacant for probably about 2 years now, if not 3. And it's like today of all days, the first day of this card. And I've got somebody over there doing surveying, and I'm like, crap, they're going to build on it. And I don't get to watch this beautiful, empty, naturey lot anymore. So that's going to be no fun, but whatever. I'm trying to keep control of this. So I'm going to definitely visit her two suggestions in the 2 cards, right? And see what I can do about that. Let's get in here and read about the Hermetic Tarot's outlook on this card. Let's revisit Mars again. Let's start with Mars. All right, so we've got Mars, the planet of driving ambition. It is a warrior that sees the day, energetic, active, and assertive. This fiery planet gets what it wants. Courage and bravery are its qualities. It is the will to live and survive. Vitality and sexual libido are its territory. It's funny because I keep thinking about like that driving ambition and like taking on that property and building something and doing something. Like that's a lot of driving ambition, right? Because that property has been plagued with issues and fires and like just weird things, right? And it's weird because it's like that Mars energy too, right? So very interesting. All right, let's get into the Hermetic Tarot's look on these two, the Nine of Swords and the Blasted Tower. Okay, let's look at the Nine of Swords because that is our card. That's our main focus. So, Lord of Despair and Cruelty. 9 swords appear, 8 of which are completely mangled. The 8 swords are crossed, 4 from each side, and the ninth sword, largest of all, is curved and rises upright from the bottom of the card. Even the hilt of this sword is barbaric in its sharpness. The center rose is transformed into a disfigured disc with 12 distorted rays. The symbol of Mars and Gemini appear above and below. All right. Let's look at this here. If I can get my card. There we go. Or my camera. So you can see that all happening right there. Yeah. That looks crazy, eh? So it's the Lord of Despair and Cruelty. Okay. And then the Blasted Tower. All right. The Blasted Tower, Lord of the Hosts of the Mighty. A blast of lightning renders total destruction and clears the way for new forms to emerge. An outline of the Tree of Life appears on either side of the tower, black on one side and white on the other, suggesting the wide scope this card may cover. The symbol of Mars appears at the upper left of the card. All right, so let's get in here and look at this. So there's our black Tree of Life, our white Tree of Life. Here's our Mars symbol up at the top. Yep. And that's a tower falling down. And then I won't revisit the lovers because we did that in the last video. So if you want to recap that, you can always go back to the previous video and you can take a look at that. All right, now let's look at our moon card. Remember, like I said, sometimes they're good, sometimes they ain't. Sometimes they're a little off. But like I said, I threw it in there to just have a little bit of extra. And sometimes it's really quite dead on, and sometimes it's not. I feel like the moon cycles are important, so I kind of put that in there. And so we've got the waning moon. We're in the waning moon, and we've got what do you need to release? And it's really interesting because remember how she said with this card, how you need to visit that anxiety, you need to visit that stress, that what you're experiencing in this card. And we need to look inside of that, right? And that's what this is pinpointing to is what do you need to release? What do you need to let go of? What is happening that causes this in you? to bubble, like what happens at bubbles, this energy, this stress, this anxiety, this nervousness up to the top, right? And then when you find that, we need to release that and get it out of our life and be done with it, right? Release, I feel, is a big part of what happens with these cards that are coming forward for the next 10 days. And then once again, like I said, we have these ones that are off to the side that we can still visit. They're extra energies if you want to pull them in. The Ace of Pentacles, Page of Pentacles, and the King of Swords. This is our last decan with the King of Swords. This one will be changing out. And then for the Hermetic Tarot, it's the Ace of Pentacles, the Princess of Pentacles, and the King of Swords, right? There's our Hermetic ones. So those ones are extra energies. And like I said, you can visit those if you want to. If you feel overwhelmed by them or you feel like you don't need them, you have enough here, then you don't even need to look at them. I leave those off to the side for you to visit if you feel the need to do so. But yeah, so here is our next 10 days. And like I said, I'm already experiencing it, and that's not fun. I'm not happy about that. This is something that I know, like that property being vacant has, it's like that little voice in my head all the time that's like, it's empty. Like, there's going to be a day when they're going to start working on it. They're going to start digging it. They're going to start doing stuff. And everywhere that we have lived, me and my husband, but even before we got married, everywhere we lived, we've had to deal with some form of major construction, and it never, ever ends. One of our places that we rented, the last place we rented before we bought a house, there was a great big huge like old gas station on top of us, and it was so close to the property line. There was maybe about 4 feet between the wall of this building and the house that we lived in. And when they tore it down, it literally sounded like the wrecking ball was going through like where I was at, where I was living. It was so scary. My cats were so afraid at the time, different cats than what I have now. Um, and it was crazy. One of the houses that we lived in, there was a great big huge water tower across the street that got taken down. So there was major construction there. Our first house that we bought, we lived across from a great big huge church, and the steeple had rotted, so they needed to pick up the steeple. And the steeple was literally the size of an apartment building when they brought it down off the top of this huge church. And all that construction happened across from us, and it, like, they had to close down the street for a day. They had to do all this stuff, and they put this great big huge tower down on the street right in front of my house, like right in front of my house, because my house was really close to the road, and it was freaky. The last house we lived in, they did the same thing where an old establishment got torn down and they built this great big huge mega hotel motel thing slash bar, and it was a nightmare, and they stuccoed it, and all of the stucco blew off of the building and into our pool, and it clogged our pool filter and caused a whole bunch of issues. And so now living here, even though I'm in the middle of nowhere, I am one of the few properties in this tiny little town that has an empty property next to me, and it looks like I'm going to be facing construction yet again. So when we moved here, it wasn't empty. There was a building there, but the building had burnt down a couple years ago while we were here, and that was a whole another adventure. But anyways, so it just, everywhere we go, construction happens, and it always is crazy and chaotic. So I have some stress and anxiety around that, right? It triggers things in me because of my past experiences, right? So obviously I need to think about that, and I need to figure out what I need to release about that, right? So yeah, craziness, right? Okay, enough about that. I kind of went off about that. But we are experiencing this energy from May 31st to June 9th. And our next decan will start June 10th to June 20th. So our next video will be up on and ready for us June 10th. And then we've got some stuff changing. And we've got some different things happening at that point. Couple of one of these cards change. Obviously these cards change. Like, there's a bunch of things. So that is our Decan video for this week. I hope everything goes really well for everybody. Try not to have too much stress and anxiety about things. Try not to go to worst case scenarios. And remember, if you can do something about it, you don't need to worry about it. If you can't do anything about it, don't worry about it either, right? So just remember how much control we actually have over these situations and try to, bring that in. If you need to, find ways to reduce anxiety and stress. Go for a walk, take a bath, leave the area, go shopping. Like she said in the book, spend some time doing some R&R for yourself, and remember to bring that stress down to a tolerable level to help you deal with it, right? So that's very important. I wish everybody a wonderful next 10 days. Like I said, just try to be kind to yourself. Remember that this is in place. So try to control that anxiety and stress. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye. Thanks.